He says, knowing that, past the time of your sojourning in fear, okay? What fear? Fear of Yahweh. Knowing that you were redeemed, okay? That you were redeemed from your futile way of life, inherited from your fathers. What you inherited from your fathers, unless your fathers were Torah observant Israelites, okay, Messianic Torah observant Israelites, you inherited some futility there. They didn't know. Let's not make that mistake with our children. Let them know so that they don't inherit, futility. He said, knowing that you were redeemed from the futility. He redeemed you out of that so that you are now set free to choose. Remember what happened when they were slaves in Egypt. They were redeemed out of Egypt. But could they choose to go back? Sure. They could choose to go left. They could choose to go right. They could choose to go anywhere. He said, I redeemed them so that they can now come and serve me. Well, you've been redeemed. He said, but you've been redeemed out of the futile way of life. Okay? So now, knowing that you were redeemed from your futile way of life, inherited from your fathers, not with what is corruptible silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Messiah, as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, foreknown indeed before the foundation of the world, but manifested in these last times for your sakes, who through him believe in Elohim, who raised him from the dead and gave him esteem, gave him honor, so that your belief and expectation are in Elohim. So there should be fear, but proper fear, the fear of Yahweh. Now he says, now listen now, starting in verse 22. Now that you have cleansed your lives in obeying the truth through the Spirit. So what is he talking about? You've gone through the water. You've immersed in the Spirit. He said, having cleansed your lives in obeying the truth through the Spirit to unfeigned brotherly love, love one another fervently with a clean heart, having been born again, not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible, through the living word of Elohim, which remains forever. In other words, you've been given a fresh start. Let's not make this into some, doctrinal thing. You've been given a fresh start. That's all it means. Okay, he says you've been given a new start. So let's not blow it and go back to the old way. You've washed that all away. You've buried the old man. He says you've turned the page. He says, because all flesh is as grass, and all the esteem of man as the flower of the grass. The grass withers and its flower falls away, but the word of Elohim remains forever. And this is the word announced as the good news to you. So what is the good news to you? Torah. The word of Elohim is the good news, okay? The gospel of Messiah, the gospel that he taught was, hey guys, come to me, come to the Torah and receive life. The good news, although it is good news, but the good news is not just telling everybody that Messiah came, died, and was resurrected for you. That is good news, but that's not the good news that's being referred to in here. The good news is that Torah and a path to salvation and deliverance, the ultimate deliverance, is available. That's the good news. That you can come and receive. That's the good news. That Yeshua did everything necessary to make it possible for you is good news. That the prophets all prophesied about it, and now it's actually happened, some of it, and the rest of it's coming. That's good news. If you are of the lost Israelites that were scattered, and he now says, I've come for those sheep to regather them and start the regathering, that's good news. But he says here, the word of Elohim remains forever, and this is the word announced as the good news to you. So what was the word that was announced to them? Yeshua, who is the Torah, who is the word, who is the light, who is the truth, who is life. That's good. That's the good news. The good news is that before, in your inherited futility, you didn't have any of that. You didn't know about any of that. You had no understanding of that. Hold on, I just got a thought to go to something that was not in my notes, but give me a second to see if I can find it quickly enough. In Ephesians chapter 2, it's verse 11, it says, therefore remember that you once outside the camp, you once goyim, you once were Gentiles in the flesh. This is Ephesians 2:11, who are called the uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision. In other words, you were called Gentiles by those who were born Jewish. So when he says circumcision and uncircumcision, he's not talking about literally there. He's talking about the actual, he's using it as a metaphor for Jews and those that are not Jews. He says that at that time, verse 12, what time? Well, when you were once Gentiles, that time. Okay? That time, you were without Messiah, excluded from citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. Isn't that the opposite of what Peter's talking about? In other words, when you were there, you didn't have all this expectation that Peter just talked about. So he's saying, look, when you were Gentiles, you had none of this. The good news is you can have all of this. You had no expectation. You didn't have Messiah. Now the good news is you can have expectation. You can have Messiah. I mean, what could be more awesome than that? He says, but now in Messiah, you who are far off have been brought near by the blood. I don't know what else could be more awesome than that. Go back to verse 1. He says, and you were dead in trespasses and sins in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air and the spirit that is now working the sons of disobedience. In other words, you didn't know any better. You were busy just doing the I-Is, and the enemy was happy to encourage you doing the I-Is. Just please yourself. The me generation, Hasatan loved that whole idea. Me, me, me. He says, among whom also we once lived in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, and also the rest. But Elohim, who is rich in compassion because of his great love in which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together through Messiah, and by his favor we were saved, we were delivered. Are we understanding this? See how it's consistent with what Peter's saying. All of this all fits together. It's beautiful. So here, Paul is explaining what it was like to not have any of that stuff, and then that we were brought near. And then Peter's saying, now that we're here, you have this expectation. You should be able to gird up your mind, walk soberly, being sober. Set your expectation on that in verse 13 of chapter 1 of 1 Peter. He says, therefore, having girded up the loins of your mind, be sober and set your expectation on the favor that has been brought to you from the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. Hopefully we're getting this and we're understanding that this is the good news.